The 641st edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Elton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
They're dancing in the aisles. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for two. Louisville with 7 seconds. Jones has it, goes left corner, Black's here for three. Back iron, 1 second to play. Stick up, no! Carolina wins it! The Tar Heels win it! 72-71. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding me?
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony back with you guys here on a Thursday, roughly 48 hours away from Carolina and Wake Forest, a game that will come your way Saturday evening, 6 p.m. on ACC Network from the Dean Dome. Carolina looking to bounce back from their loss at SMU last Saturday. Get back in the win column, get back to their winning ways. We're here to preview that matchup with the Demon Deacons. We'll tell you everything you need to know about Wake Forest. Look at this game from the Carolina perspective. We do have a discussion topic, and, of course, we'll give our keys to the game before we make our predictions. Before we do any of that, though, we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. We go to Magic Johnson for that pod thought. That thought is, quote, ask not what your teammates can do for you. Ask what you can do for your teammates, end quote. Very, basically the sports version of JFK's ask not what the country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. And this is really just to make sure that this group is still together. They're still cohesive, and they're as close as a unit as we think they are, as we've been told that they are, and just want to make sure that what happened last week doesn't become something that we point back to and say that's where the season went sideways. That's where maybe this thing got away from Carolina in a way that we did not expect it to. And so this could be making sure that you're diving for a loose ball, setting an extra ball screen, making that extra pass, whatever it may be on the court, whatever it may be off the court, but chemistry is as important now as it's ever been in the game of basketball with the way that these rosters overturn year after year with the portal and with revenue sharing. And we think this is a cohesive group. That's what Hubert Davis has told us every time that he's gotten behind the microphone. And just really need to make sure that that has still stayed intact over the past week, which I'm sure was a tough week of practice after this team, reviewed the film and then got back on the practice court to put SMU behind them and get prepared for this Wake Forest game on Saturday.
Couldn't have been a much better week for you to have a week off, not have to play a midweek game where you really just get to focus on yourself and refining some of the areas that really cost you against SMU. And I think that's something that Carolina hopefully will be able to show in this game. I mean, when it comes to, what you need to do during game day, it goes back to the three things that Hubert Davis talks about all the time: energy, effort, and enthusiasm. And that's what you're hoping that you're going to see from Carolina in this game, sort of a reset. Look, you had a good non-conference schedule, or season. It really set up well for you with the schedule that you had. And then you came into conference play. You picked up, a win that you'll take, especially with some of the results that we've seen from other teams in the conference at the start of the year against the teams that are perceived to be the bottom of the conference teams against Florida State. But, then you lose that game against SMU. You can admit to yourself that you haven't been playing the best basketball that you can play here in the first two games of conference play. And so hopefully this is the perfect time for Carolina to reset, going up against a Wake Forest team that isn't really feeling like they're in the same spot as they've been in previous years, where coming into, the conference play, you looked at Wake Forest and thought this was a team that can make the NCAA tournament. You look at this year's team, and that isn't necessarily the case, but Carolina has to make sure that they do not take this game lightly, because if they do, this is a Wake Forest team that is capable of competing with them, and this is a Wake Forest team that probably is capable of beating them, because we've seen the conference is much better, even at the bottom, than it was than we expected it to be coming into the season.
Look, Saturday's not a must-win by any stretch of the means for Carolina. With where they are, they could afford to lose this game and still achieve a lot of the things they want to achieve. But Saturday's the big game, I think, from a mental perspective, because after this game, you go out west and you got to go face, two improved teams on the West Coast, and what's going to be your first West Coast road trip since Cal and Stanford joined the SEC or joined the ACC. And so this, we would probably feel okay with the split in those two games. But if you lose this game, you could come back from the West Coast with a losing record in league play, and that's not something that I think we thought could be on the table with the way that Carolina performed in the non-con. As we set the scene for Wake Forest, the Heels are 166-70 all-time against the Big Four foe. The 166 wins are the second most against a single opponent, only trailing the 168 wins Carolina has registered against NC State. You look at this edition of the Demon Deacons, they bring with them just a 10-6 record on the year. They're already 1-2 in the league. They're 0-1 on the road, having lost their only true road game. That was to NC State. They have three players that average double-figure scoring, led by Juke Harris and his 19.9 points, 6.3 rebounds, 1.6 assists. He is shooting 45% from the field, 33% from three. Miles Colvin is their second leading scorer, 13.3 points, 4.6 rebounds, 1.3 assists. He is shooting 46% from the field, 39% from three. Then Trayvon Spillers are the last guy to average double digits and scoring 11.7 points, 5.9 rebounds, 1.8 assists. He's shooting 55% from the field, just 17% from three. Their KenPom rankings, they're 68th overall in KenPom. Their adjusted offensive efficiency rating of 113.0 is 100th in the sport, and their adjusted defensive efficiency rating of 100.7 is 51st in the sport. And they come into the matchup ranked 70th right now in the net. You look at some of the names on this roster. If you follow college basketball, if you follow the ACC, you're familiar with some of them, and pretty much where the record and where Wake Forest is quite frankly where they've been their entire time under Steve Forbes. They're not a bad basketball team. They do struggle to shoot it. They're not the best shooting team that he has fielded during his time there in Winston-Salem, but they are a team that's on the outside looking in if they want to go dancing and need a win like a win at UNC to even begin a conversation about them playing themselves onto the bubble and then maybe into the tournament field. So it's pretty much status quo for Wake Forest and what they've been the last handful of years. The record isn't sexy. They're good enough to beat you, and they need to beat you if they want any hopes and dreams of maybe hearing their name called Selection Sunday, which is, only eight weeks away.
Yeah, that's insane to think that that's actually the case. But I mean, yeah, you look at it, it's a team that isn't necessarily, the greatest shooting wise, as you said, not a team that knocks down a ton of threes in terms of the percentages, 204th in 3-point percentage, field goal percentage overall, 45 at 45.2% is 201st in the country. But it's still a team that scores the ball at a pretty decent rate, 81 points per game, which is 96th in the country. That tells you there's a lot of really high scoring teams here so far early in the season. And they're a team that, with 62 field goal attempts per game, does like to play a decent pace. So this is going to be another game where Carolina is going to see a little bit of pace out of their opponent. I think this is still a team that, Carolina should be able to take advantage of in certain areas, especially on the glass. Not a great rebounding team by any stretch. The offensive rebounding, they are pulling down 11.6 per game, but that's still only 167th in the country. So this should definitely be an area that Carolina is able to exploit. But, one of the areas that I think you look at and you say Carolina is playing another opponent like this to open conference play, team that turns the opponent over a lot, 15.7 per game. Is the turnover margin that they have or the number of turnovers that they've forced so far this season. That's 24th in all of college basketball. So again, another team that you're going to have to be able to take care of the ball against. And they are a team that throws up 26.6 3-pointers per game, which shows you that is an area that Carolina is going to have to be better in than they were in the last game. I get it. This is a team, as I said, that's not shooting a great percentage from there, but neither was SMU coming into that game. So Carolina's got to be aware that this is a team that is going to put up a decent amount of threes, and they've got to be ready to take away that perimeter, which they were unable to do against SMU. So it's a tricky group. You've got some good players. Juke Harris, certainly a guy that could challenge for all ACC first team honors. It's going to be tough because there are so many good players in the ACC. But at 19.9 a game and 6.3 rebounds per game, certainly a guy that is worth talking about, that is worth looking at as someone that Carolina is going to have some sort of answers for. And same thing with Miles Colvin. He hasn't started every game for them, but when he's been out there on the floor, I mean, you go back to the tournament that they played in, the Baha Mar Classic that they played in, he was actually really good there. He was probably their best player. And so Carolina's got to make sure that they take him away. He is shooting 39.2% from beyond the arc. So you got him, and you've got Nate Calmes, who's shooting around 40% as well. Those are two guys that Carolina has to make sure they take away in this game, because this is a group that's going to throw up a lot of threes from the outside.
You look at this game from Carolina's perspective, they bring with them a 13-2 record overall. They're 1-1 in the league, and they dropped to 17th in the AP poll after their loss last week at SMU. Carolina at home is 10-0, and if they were to win this game on Saturday, it would be their 500th win all-time in the Dean Dome. The Heels have 4 players that are averaging double figures in scoring, led by freshman sensation Caleb Wilson, 19.3 points, 10.9 rebounds, 2.7 assists. He's shooting 56% from the field, 26% from three. Seth Trimble is now second on the team in scoring, 16.7 points, 4.3 rebounds, 3.7 assists. He's shooting 46% from the field, 29% from three. Henry Visar is the third leading scorer, 16.3 points, 9.2 rebounds, 2.0 assists. He's shooting 63% from the field, 50% from three. And then Luka Bogovac, the last double-figure scorer, 10.1 points, 2.9 rebounds, 2.9 assists. He's shooting 40% from the field, 32% from three. Some numbers about Carolina. They're still top 10 in the country in defensive rebounds per game, 29.7. They're still top 5 in opponent field goal percentage against. They're 4th in that category. Opponents were shooting 38% from the field against Carolina. And they're 5th in opponent three-point percentage. Teams are shooting 30% from three against UNC. KenPom, very much more kind to Carolina as opposed to Wake Forest. The Heels are 27th overall in KenPom. Their adjusted offensive rating of 119.1 is 44th. Their adjusted defensive rating of 98.4 comes in 27th. And after a loss at SMU and a week off, Carolina is now 22nd in the net, albeit a real healthy number. So I'll get to our discussion top before we give our keys to the game and make our predictions. A lot of conversation about what Carolina's got to do at the point guard. And Ashton and I did an episode yesterday where we talked about maybe some changes we'd like to see Hubert Davis and the coaching staff make. All that is just us, speculating. We'll have to wait and see what Carolina does when they take the floor tomorrow or on Saturday night. But Seth Trimble's scored 20 points or more twice here in the last handful of games. He's provided some easy offense for Carolina, mainly with his ability to generate points in the fast break, whether it's getting all the way to the rim for a layup, a dunk, or drawing a foul. His return has been as equally important offensively as maybe it has been, defensively, where he's Carolina's best perimeter defender. When you see that he's, the second leading scorer now behind Caleb Wilson, and part of this because he has a limited sample size. He's played, far fewer games than Henry Vassar. But now that, he's healthy and we expect him to be here for the remainder of the season, is that something that needs to kind of play out and prove to be true? Like, does he need to be a guy that whenever we're looking at the box score is leading Carolina in scoring or is trailing Caleb Wilson in scoring more often than not? And maybe Henry Vassar needs to take a step back offensively where while Trimble was out, it was a 1-2 punch of Wilson and Vassar that was carrying Carolina's offense. Is maybe the key to them becoming a better version of themselves is getting more scoring punch from Seth Trimble?
I mean, to a certain extent, yes. In terms of he has to be the guy that is second on the team in scoring, I don't think that necessarily has to be the case every single game. If you're telling me that Henry Vassar is up there scoring the ball at a pretty high rate, him and Caleb are, where we got used to them being, which is 30 or more points combined, then I don't think anybody's going to argue with that. They're going to say, yeah, we'll take that, and then build off of it with a guy like Seth. Now, I do think that Seth has to be a double-digit scorer just about every night for Carolina, or else Carolina's really going to struggle. I know that we saw Jaren Stevenson find a little bit of an offensive groove in the last game. Maybe that is something that we see moving forward from him, but that's not an expectation from me, for me. So I think you just hope that that's what ends up happening, but you don't bank on it. Same thing with a guy like Luka Bogovac. I know that Luka has certainly been, has had moments where he's looked the part of the guy that Carolina was getting out of the Adriatic League. He's had some moments where he's been able to score the ball pretty successfully. But I do think that that's still something that you can't necessarily count on. Seth Trimble, it feels like you can count on him. And the thing that you need him to do the most is really just set the pace for Carolina of these games. Make sure that you are in control of how the games are going. And he is a guy that can help you do that because he's going to want to get up and down the court. He's a guy that's going to want to get to the foul line. That's an area where I think he needs to be a little bit better. Was 3 of 7 the other day at the foul line for Carolina. If you're going to get there, that's fine. You got to be able to make your foul shots. So that's really what I look at it as. I think he needs to be a guy that's scoring in double figures, But I mean, yeah, if you let's say the other day you switch him and Henry's scoring outputs, I don't think that's necessarily the worst thing. Carolina did what they had to do offensively, I thought, for the most part the other day. I thought scoring 83 points, most games you're going to take that. That should be able to win you basketball games, especially in conference play, and especially when you have the type of statistical defense that Carolina has. It's just they did not look the part on the defensive end of the floor the other day. They need to be better in that area moving forward if they and avoid what happened the other day happening too many more times in conference play, or else this could be a difficult conference schedule for Carolina, because there are some teams that are pretty good offensively. But I think you can live with him being as productive as he's been since he's came back. I think he's been pretty consistent so far. And so I have all the faith in the world that he's going to continue to produce for Carolina there this season as they go throughout conference play.
Yeah, look, if Carolina scores 80 points or more and they shoot 43% from behind the three-point line on double-digit makes, they should win the game, whether it's on the road, at home, or in a foreign country. There was no excuse for what Carolina's offensive box score looked like the other day. For one, A, for them to get beat, and B, for them to get beaten as soundly as they did primarily in that second half, where they gave up 58 points. When you look at the offense and you look at Trimble, Carolina needs his scoring desperately. There's no denying that, because Kyan Evans, bust, maybe too strong of a word, has been underwhelming. Luka Bogovac clearly hasn't been what we thought he was going to be from a scoring perspective, but he's provided, a great, lift with Carolina's ability to initiate offense in the half court. I'll go back to what I said when we talked about this team during the summer, and people were trying to champion Seth Trimble as this guy was going to lead the team in scoring. I told you that would not be a good thing for Carolina. That would spell probably not doom, but I don't know how many games Carolina would win. I don't know how many games Carolina would win if he emerges as Carolina's second clear leading scorer. I still think they need to play, obviously, through Caleb Wilson first, but through Henry Vassar second, with Seth Trimble being that third guy, really attacking in transition, really attacking in two-man games where he wants to play pick and roll with either Wilson and Vassar, and that's where he gets his offensive production. I don't know if I want him shooting the ball, 15, 16 times a game. I really don't. Maybe I'd love to run that 8 to 10 to 12 field goal attempt range with him maybe into the foul line, 4 or 5, maybe 6 times. And that kind of being the offensive production that we're getting, just simply because he's never had to carry the load offensively, for an extended period of time. I don't know if his game really suggests he could be an efficient second leading scorer for Carolina. Look at some of his shot selections, that his strengths. There are a lot of inefficient shots. If you go by the analytics people, and if he loves to shoot mid-range shots. He loves to live in the lane, but not at the rim. He shoots a bunch of contested 8 to 10 footers. Now for him, those are the strength of his offensive game, but those aren't the most efficient shots. Outside of his, sophomore season, he hasn't been an efficient perimeter shooter for the majority of his career, and he's struggling at the foul line to be a guard. So, yes, Carolina needs his production. I don't think it's something that we need to change the way that we're trying to divvy up the offense and say, hey, we need you to become our second leading scorer. We're going to take we need Henry to take a back seat. This is why it's so imperative that they find some sort of consistent production from Kyan Evans and Luka Bogovac from the perimeter. That's going to be how Carolina finds its footing as an offensive basketball team. Or those two guys living up to what they were brought in here to be. So we'll have to wait and see. But I would argue that him emerging as Carolina's second leading scorer is not a good thing. That I would still rather my top 2 scorers on most nights be Caleb Wilson and B. Henry Vassar. Let's get to our keys to the game, then we'll make our predictions and get out of this edition of the podcast. The first thing I wrote down was play with a sense of urgency. As I mentioned, this isn't a must-win for Carolina. This is a big game, and I do think you'll be able to feel that if you're lucky enough to be in the arena on Saturday night. Carolina fans are smart, man. They know what this team looked like the last time they were on the court, and they understand that 1-2 and is a big difference from being 2-1 in the league, especially when you've got a West Coast road trip coming up next week where you got to play 2 games at 2 environments you've never played a conference game at against 2 improved teams. And so it's not a must win, but it's a big game. We know how much Hubert Davis, kind of values and really worships and cherishes playing at home on the weekend in the ACC. This is, a late evening tip, so probably going to have a bigger feel to it than if they were maybe playing, excuse me, at high noon. But I do think, we've seen this team, what they've been at home. They're undefeated. They've been very dominant, winning by, over 20 points per game over the course of their 10 wins. I'm not expecting or demanding that from them in this game, but I do expect a team that's had a week off, that had, 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, to work on themselves in practice. Thursday, Friday will be spent working on Wake Forest to see them clean up some areas that they weren't efficient in the other day, and expect to see a better overall effort. And so the first thing is just setting the tone right away and letting Wake Forest know you're not walking into our gym and going to be able to maybe push us around the way that Carolina got pushed around last week at SMU.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you don't want to see Carolina come out sleepy because, this game starts at 6. It's a weird start time. It's still, a little bit later in the night than you'd probably like. But at the same time, it's not a primetime matchup. So it's in one of those weird spots. But, I mean, yeah, you got to come out motivated to bounce back from what you did. That's really what you want to see is a sense of urgency to respond to what just happened. Because that's a loss that, we can debate how good of a loss it was, how bad of a loss it was. That team just went on the road and lost to Clemson. I don't know where exactly Clemson's going to end up being, but I think that's another one of those teams that, is going to be right on the precipice of probably making the NCAA tournament. For Carolina, you should feel like, let's respond to this game. Let's show people that we really are one of the best teams in the ACC. And so, yeah, I want to see that sense of urgency on the offensive end of the floor. There's no doubt about that. But really, it starts on that defensive end of the floor. What are you doing in that area? Are you responding to what you saw against SMU? Or are you, fighting through ball screens instead of just switching everything? That's something we need to see more of because I get it, man. Hubert said that he's switching a lot more stuff because he likes the defensive ability of his guys out there. He likes the versatility that they bring. But at the same time, there are moments where you've got to know, especially if you're a guy like Seth Trimble, hey, I've got to stick on my guy here. That if he's playing against Juke Harris, which he might be matched up on Juke. Juke is 6'7", so we'll have to see ultimately what exactly Carolina does with him. But, you've got to make sure that you have the guys that you want on certain guys on the floor as much as possible. So hopefully that's what you see from Carolina. You see that sense of urgency to respond to what happened against SMU, and they come out and play a really strong game against a Wake Forest team that, as we said, might not be great in certain areas, but is a really solid team scoring the basketball, and that could be an area where they test Carolina.
Yeah, the second key I wrote down was you've got to limit Juke Harris. I don't know if you want to maybe call him Boopy Miller light, but you're talking about a guy that's averaging, roughly 20 points per game and over 6 rebounds per game as a guard, and is shooting 45% from the field, 33% from 3, but has the ability to do what Boopy Miller did the other day, which was be the best player on the floor and erupt for a pretty big scoring number on a very efficient shooting. He was 10 of 13 against Carolina the other night on his way to 27 points. I'd like to see Seth Trimble on him, but given, you mentioned his size, this might be a game where you use, the length and the versatility of maybe a Jared Stevenson. Can he maybe hold up on the perimeter? And you put, his size and his length on him to contest some shots. Mainly, for as much as we talk about, Seth Trimble being the best perimeter defender on this roster, and then that's the case, Carolina also has other good defensive players that can guard that on the perimeter. We've seen Jared Stevenson hold his own. We've seen Jonathan Powell at different times hold his own. We've seen Jaden Young. Yes, he's a smaller guard, but sometimes that can be used to your benefit. You kind of get up in the shooter and be able to affect some of the shots. Can you maybe wear him down with just a multitude of different defenders being thrown his way? Regardless, you just cannot let him come into the gym and have one of those nights where he's seeing a big basket, where he's pretty much getting to his spots and getting whatever shot he wants up and shooting it with the confidence that every time that he shoots it, it's going to go in. Is he going to make some shots? Yeah, he can make some shots. But it's like Hubert Davis said, he was talking with Jones and Adam with a weekly feature he does for GoHeels.com. When you allow a team to shoot the way SMU shot in the second half, at some point you're helping them. It's not them just getting hot.
Yeah,
we help them shoot 71% from the field. You imagine that, that was a big point of emphasis this week. You would imagine he's a big point of emphasis on the scouting report. And so, yes, I can understand that he's going to make some plays and he's going to make some shots, but he cannot have the type of day against Carolina that Boopy had last week down in Dallas.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to get the ball out of his hands. Make someone else beat you. And look, if Miles Colvin wants to go off and just have an unbelievable performance, and that's what sparks this Wake Forest offense, then you live with it. If it's Trayvon Spillers having a ton of success down low, well, then that's ultimately what you live with. You just don't want Juke Harris completely taking over the game. And I think that there are a multitude, of different options that you have to be able to take them away. Ultimately, if you want to put Seth Trimble on him, that's fine. You're giving up a little bit of size. He could potentially shoot over him, but that's your best perimeter defender. Even though he was coming off of a game where he struggled, you feel like that's one of your best options for Carolina going into this game. But you also mentioned, you've got Jaron Stevenson, who is really successful guarding on the perimeter. We've seen at times this year, he's been one of Carolina's better perimeter defenders. And so for a team that just needs to bounce back in that area, I think those are probably the two biggest guys that you're counting on in that play starter-like minutes. And then, we got to figure out how many minutes Jonathan Powell is actually going to play in this game. If they want to play Jonathan Powell a decent amount, well, then there you go. You've got another weapon. You've got a dude that's 6'6" and can match the size, and I think has the defensive intensity that you're looking for. I want to see more Jonathan Powell in this game. Unless Luka Bogovac is just going absolutely crazy on the offensive end of the floor, or he's sharing the basketball at such a high rate, he's got like 10 assists, then you just can't take him off the floor. You need to see more of Powell. I get it, man. Luka was doing some things for you, setting the table on the offensive end of the floor, but I really think that Jonathan Powell was missed the other day. And so I want to see a little bit more of him in this game. I think matched up against Juke Harris, he actually is probably the best matchup in terms of size and defensive skill set to be able to take him away even to a certain extent. You're not going to completely take him out of the game. I don't think that's the case. But if you can limit him to maybe, 12, 14 points, you feel a lot better about your chances to win, because then it's putting pressure on other guys on that team to win. Teams are going to want to do the same thing to Caleb Wilson. And we saw SMU do that to Caleb Wilson. And you saw how Carolina responded. They weren't able to necessarily score enough points to be able to win that game against SMU. You want to put Wake Forest in a similar situation in this game, where you take away their leading scorer and force someone else to have to step up.
Last thing I wrote down was to establish an inside scoring presence, something that I don't think Carolina was able to do in the way that they wanted to in the loss at SMU. They did, total a pretty decent number in terms of points in the paint. I think they had something in the 30s, but it wasn't through Wilson and through Vassar. It was a lot of it through not through Caleb Wilson. A lot of it was Seth Trimble, getting some points at the basket from the pick and roll, which, again, that's still those points still count. Those points still matter. You need your two best players just pounding the ball inside and overwhelming the opponent with your size, your length, and really your physicality. I think you're going to get a motivated, a ticked off, a pissed off Caleb Wilson after what happened, the other night. We saw his mom kind of come to his defense and say that he was sick. That still does not excuse him touching the ball just 3 times in the final 16 minutes. He's the best player on your roster, maybe even at 75%. He should never go, a possession without touching the ball, let alone limited touches over the final 16 minutes or so in the game. For me, I think this really comes back to how does Henry Vassar respond individually? I was really disappointed with him against SMU. And someone, did not like my criticism. When I said that he got punked, he left a mean comment on YouTube saying that I can't say that whenever, I look like someone that eats, Doritos, drinks Red Bulls, and eats Intimate Bite muffins. And look, maybe that's fair. You got 2 out of the 3 right. I love Doritos. I love Red Bull. I don't really seek out the Intimates Little Bite muffins, but whatever you want to say to make you feel better, go right ahead. But I thought he got bullied the other day. I thought he got pushed around. I thought that was the first time I thought Arizona Henry Vassar showed up. Because I thought even, in the SMU where I thought Carolina as a team got out physicaled, I thought they did push back and fight back. They just got beaten by a much more physical team that night. I didn't get that sense the other day from Vassar. It felt like he was just reluctant to get moved off the block. He was comfortable playing more from the outside in as opposed to playing inside out. So I imagine hopefully Sean May challenged him this week in practice. But those 2 guys, look, they are, in my opinion, your 2 best players. They're your 2 most important players offensively. Let's establish them early. Let's establish them often, and just pound Wake Forest on the interior. Because I don't think over the course of 40 minutes they can keep up with you, as most teams in this league I don't think can. When those 2 guys are playing at the level we've seen them play at the majority of the season, when they were combining for roughly 35 points and 20 rebounds on any given night.
I mean, it's really simple. You need to go inside because they do not have a single player on their roster that is taller than 6'9". They don't have somebody that's 6'10" or taller. So you're matching up against 2 guys that have that type of length. This is where it needs to show up. And, this is one of those games where if Carolina's not shooting the ball efficiently, you want to see Carolina crash the offensive glass, get some easy baskets inside. Now, part of it is that, as you mentioned, the guards have to just get these guys touches because you can be on the block all you want. But if they're not giving you the basketball and it's just passing around the perimeter, well, then you'd be stupid if you're Henry Vassar to say, I'm going to stay down low even though I'm not getting the entry passes. Now, look, this might be a team that zones up against you because that worked for SMU. So you've got to be creative about how you get the ball inside to some of your better players, but you've got to do it in this game. You've got to find a way to be able to get some of those easy looks at the basket, especially early on. Just settle yourself into a rhythm because it feels like you look at the last 2 games, and I think one of the biggest issues that Carolina has had early in games is that they have taken a lot of poor shots from the outside. It's not just the fact that they're shooting from out there. It's the fact that the looks that they're getting aren't even necessarily good looks, but for some reason they feel the need to force them up. Why not make it easier on yourself? Dump the ball inside and let those guys go to work. And, look, if Caleb is struggling again with the double team, then that's fine. At least show me that you're committed, though, to going inside. And then if we have to make adjustments from there, then you end up making adjustments from there. I think that's the mindset that you need to have if you're Carolina, because this is a smaller team. This is a team that's probably not going to be able to handle the level of physicality that a guy like Caleb Wilson has, a guy like Henry Vassar for the most part this season has had. And so you need to be able to, find a way on the offensive end to put the ball inside. And then on the defensive end, hey, just take away the basket. You guys did such a great job of that early in the season of protecting the rim, challenging everything that was at the rim. Now, you got to do it without fouling. That was one of the big issues for Henry in the game on Saturday against SMU. It's got to be a little bit better in this game, and you've got to make sure that you can stay in the game for Carolina. But I want to see him challenging some of those shots at the rim, making things a little bit difficult for the opponent as opposed to just giving them some easy layups like it felt like SMU had at certain times in the game. And so I think that's going to be very important for Carolina, is that their bigs respond to what wasn't a terrible game. I want people to understand that when I put that in the article, it wasn't that I was saying they had a bad day, but it certainly wasn't the type of production that you need in order to be successful this year, as you said earlier. And so I think that's what Carolina really needs to do in this game, is focus on getting those big guys in the areas that they need to and finding a way to get them scoring.
Carolina enters with a 76.8% chance to win. That, according to ESPN's analytics. I'll let you go first. Who wins the game and why?
Yeah, I think Carolina wins the game. I think, as you mentioned, you said that Caleb Wilson would be pissed off. I think this whole team's going to be pissed off because the way that they performed the other day was not up to their standard at all. You look at where they have prided themselves on being successful for most of the year, and it's been on the defensive end of the floor, because Carolina has been really good defensively for most of the season. Now, some of that you could say is that teams were maybe missing shots for Carolina. You were playing some lesser opponents, but I think in their mind, I mean, you aren't second in the country coming into that game against SMU in field goal percentage allowed if you're a bad defensive basketball team. So I think there's going to be, a concerted effort to respond to that, to rebound from that. And I think Carolina's size will really be a difference in this game. I think they are going to get the ball down low to their guys. I like for that group to bounce back and have a 35-40 point combined scoring output for that group. And then I think Seth Trimble's just going to continue to do what he's doing, man. And I think if Carolina gets that, then they're going to be perfectly fine in this game. Wake Forest is one of those teams that can challenge Carolina if Carolina doesn't come out with the right mindset, but I feel like they do, and I feel like Carolina finds a way to win against Wake Forest, which is the most important thing on Saturday.
Yeah, I think Carolina bounces back. I think they could get, their 167th win all time against the Demon Deacons. Most importantly, improved to 14-2 on the year. And 2-1 in ACC play. Caleb Wilson, I think, bounces back. I think after a week off, the country may have forgotten about him. I think he'll remind him just how good he is. Well, I think he'll have some dunks and some plays that have us all talking about him in a big way when we recap this podcast. I think Vassar bounces back in a big way, and I think with a week off, they'll find a way to get some more production out of their backcourt in the ways that they know that they need to. Because Hubert Davis isn't dumb. He knows that they can't get where they want to get to with the level of production from Kyan Evans and from Luka. Hopefully they found some answers this week. Hopefully that translates onto the basketball court. I think Carolina, though, does respond, and they pick up that 500th win in the Smith Center. No matter what happens, we'll have you covered here and on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. The game preview will go up Saturday morning. We'll have you covered with the recap. We're kind of disjointed this weekend. I'm working. I'll be at the station working the Panther playoff game. So more than likely, Anthony will have you covered on the website side of things with that recap. So make sure you're on the lookout for that after the game goes final, as we're keeping you covered with all things Carolina basketball. Been a busy week for Carolina football. A bunch of transfers into the program. Some more guys out of the program. All that news has been covered for you guys. An individual article for every transfer. All that coverage can be found HeelToughBlog.com, where we're keeping you locked and loaded with the latest with Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Just search the Four Corners Podcast, and we will pop up there. We encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any audio editions of the show throughout the remainder of the year. If you consume us on the digital platform, the best way to be notified, follow the Facebook page at Heel Tough Blog, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog, or follow me on Twitter at HTB_Josh. The second we go live, you'll get a notification sent to your mobile device. You can jump in and be a part of the conversation. Just a programming note, because usually, especially during conference play, we're live night of games. But as I mentioned with my working, probably going to be Sunday morning before we're able to get on here and recap the Wake Forest win. So more than likely, unless something goes horribly wrong on Saturday night, like Carolina gets blown out, then yeah, we'll probably get on here and record. But we'll probably look to record Sunday morning before the NFL action gets started for the playoffs. So just be on the lookout for that program. Probably come your way Sunday as opposed to Saturday night. But with that, folks, that is going to wrap up this edition of the podcast. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for both watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.